Nobody in Midtown Manhattan expected a scandal at noon, especially not at the grand opening of Whitmore Global Holdings' newest tower. The streets had been cleaned until they gleamed. Silver barricades lined the sidewalks like polished ribs. Cameras hovered on long lenses, reporters whispered into microphones, and a sea of well-dressed guests moved in waves beneath the winter sun. At the center of it all stood the man everyone came to see. Jonathan Whitmore. He wasn't just rich, he was a headline with a heartbeat. A self-made billionaire who had turned a small logistics company into a worldwide empire. He had the kind of face that looked carved for magazine covers. Sharp jaw, controlled smile, steel-gray eyes that could flatten a room without raising a voice. His suits were always tailored so perfectly that people joked he didn't walk, he glided. Today, Jonathan wore a midnight black coat over a charcoal suit, and the crowd loved it. They chanted his name like he was a celebrity athlete instead of a corporate titan. People leaned forward, stretching phones high to capture a clean shot of him waving at the cameras. "Mr. Whitmore. Over here. Jonathan. Look this way. Sir, any comment on the new expansion?" Jonathan lifted a hand, calm and composed, his smile practiced but convincing. He stepped toward the ribbon-cutting stage set up in front of the glass and steel building. A huge banner behind him read, "Whitmore Tower, Opening Day." Standing to the side of the stage, almost invisible, was a young woman in a plain navy uniform with her hair neatly pulled back beneath a simple headband. Her name was Emily Carter, and no one in the crowd had any reason to notice her. She was one of the temporary house staff assigned to the event, trained to move quietly, refill drinks, and disappear into the background. Emily had done this kind of work for years. She knew how to stay small. But as she watched Jonathan Whitmore smile for the cameras, something inside her tightened like a knot being pulled. She wasn't staring at his suit or his fame or the way powerful people laughed too loudly when he spoke. She was staring at his face. Because she saw something no one else seemed to notice. At first, it was tiny, almost nothing. A faint twitch at the corner of his mouth. A brief blink that lasted just a second too long. The smallest hitch in his posture, like the air had suddenly become heavier on his shoulders. Emily's heart gave a hard thump. "No," she whispered to herself, barely audible over the crowd. She had seen that look before. Not on Jonathan Whitmore, obviously, but on people who were about to fall. She glanced around, hoping someone else had noticed. The security team in black suits stood alert, scanning the crowd for threats. The executives near the stage smiled and clapped at the cameras. The mayor of New York City stood ready with scissors in hand. Everyone was looking outward, toward the headlines, toward the optics. Nobody was watching the billionaire closely enough to realize his body was giving warnings. Emily's hands went cold. She told herself she was imagining it. That she was just nervous. That it wasn't her business. She was a maid, not a doctor. A worker, not a savior. But then Jonathan's smile twitched again. His eyes unfocused for a fraction of a second, as if the world had shifted and he needed to find it again. His fingers flexed at his side, like he was fighting a strange numbness. Emily's breathing shortened. Her mind ran fast, flipping through memories like a deck of cards. Her father collapsing in their tiny apartment in Philadelphia years ago. The way he'd laughed and insisted he was fine. The way his face had looked right before his knees hit the floor. The paramedic telling her later, if someone had acted sooner, we could have saved time. Emily swallowed hard. There was no paramedic here. There was only a crowd, cameras, and a billionaire about to speak. Jonathan stepped forward to the microphone. His voice came through the speakers, smooth and confident. "Thank you all for being here today," he began. "Whitmore Tower represents more than business." He paused. Just a blink-long pause, but Emily felt it like thunder. Jonathan's right hand lifted slightly, not in a wave, but in a subtle tremor. His gaze dipped. His brows tightened, as if pain had flashed behind his eyes. The crowd didn't notice. They were too busy recording. But Emily did. And she saw the next thing too, Jonathan's throat working strangely, as if swallowing had suddenly become difficult. His lips parted, but his words slowed, and the rhythm of his speech shifted. His face, his perfect, composed billionaire face, briefly looked confused. Emily watched his right shoulder sag. A second later, Jonathan's knees softened, just a little. Not enough to fall. Not yet. Emily's mind screamed, "He's going down." She looked at the security guards. One was watching the crowd. Another was checking an earpiece. A third had his back to the stage, scanning rooftops. No one was watching Jonathan's body. Emily took a step forward before she even realized she'd moved. Her feet carried her out of her assigned corner, her pulse hammering louder than the crowd. Someone hissed, "Hey, where are you going?" Emily didn't answer. Jonathan's voice stumbled again. "Represents more than—" He blinked, longer this time. His eyes didn't refocus right away. Emily's skin prickled. She pushed through the edge of the group beside the stage, her navy uniform suddenly glaringly out of place among designer coats and tailored suits. An event coordinator frowned. "Miss, you can't." Emily didn't stop, because Jonathan's head tilted slightly, like he was trying to balance on a ship deck. His fingers curled inward, and his mouth tried to form a word that didn't come out right. Emily's stomach dropped. She knew the signs. And she knew one more thing, too. If he collapsed in front of a crowd, the chaos would cost minutes. Minutes he might not have. The microphone squealed as Jonathan leaned forward slightly, almost as if he were losing his sense of where the stage ended. Emily reached him in 3 quick steps. Her hand lifted. And before anyone could stop her, before her fear could talk her out of it, Emily Carter slapped Jonathan Whitmore across the face. The crack echoed through the entire plaza. The world froze. Phones stopped moving. Reporters stopped talking. The mayor stood rigid with scissors midair. The executives' mouths dropped open. Security guards snapped into motion all at once, hands reaching for weapons and radios. Jonathan's head turned with the slap. His eyes widened, shocked and suddenly sharp, like the impact had dragged him back from somewhere far away. A gasp swept through the crowd like a wave. "What the— Did she just— Oh my God!" A woman near the front screamed, "She hit him!" Security lunged forward. 2 guards grabbed Emily by the arms so hard she felt her bones vibrate. "Are you insane?" one shouted. Emily didn't fight. She didn't scream. She only stared at Jonathan's face, searching it. Jonathan blinked rapidly, touching his cheek. His breathing was uneven now, and his pupils looked strange, one slightly slower to react than the other. Emily's voice came out firm, urgent, and low. "Sir," she said, "you need to sit down." "No." Jonathan stared at her like she was a ghost. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice sharp, humiliation flashing in his tone. Emily didn't flinch. "You're not okay," she said. "You're about to collapse." Jonathan's jaw tightened. The crowd buzzed with outrage. Cameras zoomed in, eating up the moment like it was entertainment. The head of security barked, "Mr. Whitmore, should we remove her?" Jonathan looked furious. His pride rose in him like fire. He opened his mouth to speak. And then his right hand went numb. His fingers twitched. His vision blurred. Jonathan Whitmore took one breath, trying to stand tall in front of everyone. And the billionaire's legs gave out. The moment Jonathan Whitmore's legs buckled, the entire plaza erupted. Gasps turned into shouts. Shouts turned into panic. 1 second, he was the most powerful man in Manhattan, standing tall beneath glass and steel, cameras worshipping his every movement. The next, his knees folded like paper, and his body pitched forward, weightless and wrong. Security reacted on instinct. 2 guards lunged, barely catching him before his head hit the stage. The microphone screeched as it toppled sideways. A ripple of screams rolled through the crowd, phones shaking as people struggled to keep recording while stepping backward at the same time. "Get him down. Clear the area. Call an ambulance, now." Jonathan's body sagged in their arms, heavier than anyone expected. His face had gone pale, the sharp confidence drained from it in seconds. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring past the skyline as if he couldn't quite remember where he was. Emily was still being held by the guards who had grabbed her after the slap, but the moment Jonathan fell, their grip loosened. Confusion replaced anger. "I told you," she said breathlessly, her voice shaking but firm. "I told you he wasn't okay." No one answered her. The mayor was rushed off stage by aides. Executives shouted over one another. A PR director was already yelling into a phone, panic barely concealed beneath a polished voice. "Cut the live stream. Cut it now." Too late. Every camera was already locked in. Jonathan's chest rose unevenly. His right arm lay slack, fingers curled at an unnatural angle. One side of his mouth drooped slightly, subtle but terrifying to anyone who knew what it meant. Emily's stomach twisted. "He's having a stroke," she said, louder this time. "You need to lay him flat and keep his head supported." One of the guards snapped, "Ma'am, step back." Emily shook her head violently. "No. Listen to me. Do not let him stand. Do not let him drink anything. He needs a hospital, now." Her words sliced through the chaos sharper than the sirens that were already wailing in the distance. One guard hesitated. He looked down at Jonathan's face, then back at Emily. "How do you know?" he asked. Emily swallowed. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to stay steady. "Because I've seen it before." Jonathan groaned faintly. His eyes flickered toward Emily, recognition fighting confusion. His lips parted as if to speak, but only a breath came out. The guard made a decision. "Clear a path," he shouted. "Get the vehicle." Another guard radioed urgently. "Medical emergency. Possible stroke. Expedite transport." The crowd parted as security formed a barrier, pushing reporters back. People shouted questions that went unanswered. Was he attacked? Did she poison him? Who is that woman? Emily barely heard them. Her focus stayed on Jonathan as they lowered him onto a stretcher that seemed to appear from nowhere. A medic knelt beside him, checking his pupils, his pulse, his airway. "Time of onset?" the medic asked sharply. Emily answered without hesitation. "Less than 5 minutes ago." He showed facial twitching, slurred speech, loss of balance, right-side weakness. The medic glanced up, surprised. "You trained?" Emily shook her head. "No. Just experienced." Jonathan was wheeled toward the waiting black SUV that would rush him to St. Matthew's Medical Center. As the stretcher rolled away, Jonathan's hand twitched weakly, fingers brushing the air. Emily stepped forward instinctively. "Sir," she said softly, leaning close enough that only he could hear. "Stay awake. Focus on my voice." Jonathan's eyes struggled to lock onto her face. Pride and anger flickered there, even now. "You," he whispered hoarsely. "You hit me." Emily nodded once. "Yes. Why?" His voice cracked, half accusation, half confusion. "Because I needed your brain to wake up," she said gently. "And it worked." For a split second, something like understanding crossed his face. Then the doors slammed shut, and the vehicle sped away, siren screaming. Silence followed, heavy, shocked silence. And then the blame began. Security turned on Emily instantly. "You," a guard barked, grabbing her arm again. "You're coming with us." Emily didn't resist as they escorted her away from the plaza, past whispering guests and furious executives. Phones followed her like weapons. "Is that the maid? She assaulted him. She should be arrested." Emily's cheeks burned, but she kept her head up. Fear crept into her chest now that the adrenaline was fading. What if she was wrong? What if the slap made things worse? What if she had just ruined her life on instinct and memory? She was taken into a quiet side room inside the building, far from the cameras. 2 guards stood by the door. A woman in an expensive coat, Whitmore's head of corporate communications, paced back and forth like a caged animal. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" the woman snapped. "That moment is already everywhere." Emily folded her hands in front of her. I stopped him from collapsing alone in front of thousands of people." "You assaulted a billionaire," the woman hissed. "On camera." Emily met her eyes. "And if I hadn't, he might be dead in 10 minutes." The room fell quiet. Minutes passed like hours. Then a guard's radio crackled. "Update from St. Matthew's," a voice said. "Doctors confirm acute ischemic stroke. Patient stabilized. Early intervention prevented major damage." Emily's knees nearly gave out. She exhaled shakily, pressing her lips together to keep from crying. The woman in the expensive coat froze. "What?" she whispered. The radio continued. "Doctor says if intervention had been delayed, outcome would have been catastrophic." No one spoke. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Slowly, the anger in the room shifted into something else, something closer to shock. The woman turned to Emily, studying her like she was seeing her for the first time. You knew," she said. Emily nodded. "I recognized the signs." "From where?" Emily hesitated. Old memories stirred, painful and sharp. "My father," she said quietly. "He didn't get help fast enough." The door opened again. This time, it was a senior security officer, his face unreadable. "Mr. Whitmore is conscious," he said. "And he's asking questions." The woman swallowed. "About what?" The officer looked directly at Emily. "About the woman who slapped him." Emily's heart thudded hard in her chest. Because saving a billionaire's life was one thing. But facing him afterward, when the cameras were rolling, the humiliation still fresh, and the power balance painfully clear, that was something else entirely. And Emily had a feeling this was only the beginning. St. Matthew's Medical Center had a way of silencing the world. The moment Emily Carter stepped inside, the noise of Manhattan, the horns, the sirens, the shouting, fell away, replaced by the steady hum of machines and the faint smell of antiseptic. Everything felt too clean, too controlled, as if emotion itself was not allowed past the automatic doors. Emily sat alone on a hard plastic chair outside the intensive care unit, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her Navy maid's uniform was wrinkled now, stained faintly with dust from the plaza. She looked painfully out of place among the men in tailored suits and women in heels pacing the hallway. Every few minutes, someone glanced at her. Some with curiosity, some with suspicion, some with open resentment. She felt it all. The slap had followed her here. Across the corridor, 2 Whitmore executives whispered fiercely, their eyes darting toward Emily like knives. She embarrassed him in front of the world. If this goes bad, she'll be our scapegoat. She should be in a holding cell, not a hospital. Emily stared at the floor, pretending she didn't hear. Her chest felt tight, not with fear of punishment, but with fear that she might still be wrong. Doctors had stabilized Jonathan Whitmore, yes. They had confirmed the stroke. But medicine was never certainty. Anything could still happen. A man in a dark gray suit approached her. He was older, silver-haired, with a kind of calm authority that didn't need to announce itself. "Emily Carter?" he asked. She looked up slowly. "Yes." "I'm Robert Hale," he said. "Chief of Security for Mr. Whitmore." Her stomach dropped. "Am I under arrest?" she asked quietly. Robert studied her for a long moment, then shook his head. "Not at the moment." That didn't sound reassuring. "Mr. Whitmore is awake," Robert said. "He's stable. Doctors say early recognition saved him from severe brain damage." Emily closed her eyes briefly, relief washing through her like warmth after cold rain. Robert continued, "He's asking to see you." Her breath caught. "Me?" "Yes." "Alone." The hallway seemed to tilt slightly. Emily stood on unsteady legs. "Why?" she asked. Robert's expression softened, just a fraction. "Because he wants answers." They walked in silence down a private corridor reserved for VIP patients. The walls were quiet shades of blue, the lighting soft. Emily could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. At the door, Robert paused. "I'll be right outside," he said. "Say whatever you need to say, but understand something, Miss Carter. Mr. Whitmore is not a man who forgets humiliation easily." Emily nodded. "Neither am I." Robert opened the door and stepped aside. Jonathan Whitmore lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller than she remembered. Tubes ran from his arm. Monitors beeped steadily beside him. His face was pale, but his eyes were sharp, alert in a way that told Emily he was already regaining control. He turned his head slightly when she entered. "So," Jonathan said hoarsely, "the maid returns." Emily stopped just inside the room. "Sir." There was a long silence. "You slapped me," he said flatly. "Yes." "In public?" "Yes." Jonathan's eyes searched her face. "Do you have any idea how many people saw that?" "I do." "And yet you did it anyway." Emily took a breath. "Yes." Jonathan exhaled slowly, irritation flickering across his face. "Most people who hit me are escorted out in handcuffs." "I wasn't trying to hurt you," Emily said. "I was trying to wake your brain." Jonathan's gaze sharpened. "Explain." She stepped closer, stopping at the foot of the bed. Her voice steadied as she spoke, not rehearsed, not defensive, just honest. "You were showing early stroke symptoms. Facial twitching. Slurred cadence. Loss of balance. When I slapped you, it triggered a sensory shock, enough to delay progression until medical help arrived." Jonathan stared at her. "You sound like a neurologist," he said. "I'm not." "Then how do you know all this?" Emily hesitated. The past pressed against her ribs, heavy and painful. "My father died when I was 19, she said softly. "He collapsed in front of me. I didn't recognize the signs. I thought he was just tired. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late." Jonathan's expression shifted. "I studied afterward," Emily continued. "Read everything I could. Took free classes. Watched videos. Promised myself I'd never miss it again." Jonathan looked away, swallowing. "And today," he said quietly, "you didn't." "No." Another silence fell between them, this one different. Heavier. Thoughtful. Jonathan flexed his right hand slowly. "Doctor says if I'd collapsed 10 minutes later, I might not be speaking." Emily nodded. "So," he said, turning back to her, "you saved my life." The words felt surreal. "I did what anyone should," Emily replied. Jonathan gave a faint, humorless smile. "You'd be surprised how few do." He studied her more carefully now, not as staff, not as a problem, but as a person. "How long have you worked events like this?" he asked. 7 years, Emily said. "Hotels, private homes, corporate gatherings. And you're still a maid?" "Yes." Jonathan frowned slightly. "Why?" Emily met his gaze. "Because life doesn't always reward effort the way people think it should." That answer stayed with him. A knock sounded at the door. A doctor entered briefly, checked Jonathan's vitals, and left with a satisfied nod. Jonathan waited until they were alone again. "Emily Carter," he said slowly, "the internet thinks you're either a hero or a criminal." She smiled faintly. "That's fair. My board wants you gone," he continued. "Arrested. Silenced. Forgotten." Emily's smile faded. "And you?" Jonathan's eyes hardened, not with anger, but with resolve. "I don't forget people who save my life," he said. "Especially not ones brave enough to slap me in front of the world." He paused. "But understand this. Saving me is only the beginning. The people who wanted me weak won't be happy I'm alive." Emily's brow furrowed. "Wanted you weak?" Jonathan leaned back slightly, the weight of his empire settling around him even from a hospital bed. "Someone didn't want me standing on that stage today," he said quietly. "And you interrupted more than a speech." Emily felt a chill crawl up her spine. She had thought she was stepping into a medical emergency. She was wrong. She had stepped into a war. The city outside St. Matthew's Medical Center kept moving as if nothing had changed. Traffic snarled. Screens flashed headlines. People laughed in cafes and argued on sidewalks. But inside the private recovery wing, time moved differently, slow, deliberate, heavy with things unsaid. Emily Carter stood near the window of Jonathan Whitmore's hospital room, arms folded tightly across her chest. Night had fallen, and Manhattan glittered below like a field of distant stars. She should have gone home hours ago. Her supervisor had already sent 3 unanswered messages. But Jonathan Whitmore had asked her to stay. Not ordered. Asked. That alone unsettled her. Jonathan lay propped up against pillows, looking far more composed than any man who had narrowly escaped death should. The machines beside him beeped steadily, their rhythm calm, controlled, almost obedient. "You said someone wanted me weak," Emily said quietly, breaking the silence. "What did you mean?" Jonathan didn't answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the dark glass of the window, where his reflection stared back at him, paler now, thinner, but still unmistakably powerful. "In my world," he said slowly, "illness is not just a personal matter. It's leverage." Emily turned toward him. "You think someone caused your stroke?" Jonathan's jaw tightened. "I think someone hoped I wouldn't survive it." The words landed heavily between them. "That's a serious accusation," Emily said. "So is hitting a billionaire in public," Jonathan replied coolly. "And yet here we are." He shifted slightly, wincing as a dull ache moved through his arm. "For months, I've felt off. Subtle things. Headaches. Moments of disorientation. My doctors ran tests, but nothing obvious showed up." Emily listened carefully. "Did you change anything recently? Medication? Diet?" Jonathan's eyes flickered. "My personal physician did." Emily stiffened. "Your personal physician?" "Yes. Dr. Leonard Crane. He's been with me for 5 years. Trusted. Discreet. And recently—" Emily pressed. Jonathan exhaled. "Recently, he adjusted my blood pressure medication. Said it was preventative." Emily's stomach tightened. "That kind of change should be monitored closely," she said. "Especially under stress." Jonathan nodded. "After today, I asked the hospital neurologist to review my history." Quietly. "And—" Jonathan reached to the side table and slid a thin folder toward her. Emily hesitated, then opened it. Inside were medical notes, lab reports, highlighted sections marked by a doctor's pen. Her eyes skimmed the page. Then stopped. "This dosage," she whispered. "It's wrong." Jonathan watched her carefully. "How wrong?" "Dangerously," Emily said, voice tight. "In certain patients, it can increase the risk of ischemic stroke, especially under physical or emotional stress." Jonathan closed his eyes briefly. "The neurologist said the same thing," he murmured. "But that's not the worst part." Emily looked up. Jonathan opened his eyes again, colder now. "Dr. Crane sits on the medical advisory board of Whitmore Global," he said. "And 2 weeks ago, he quietly purchased shares through a shell company." Emily's breath caught. "Someone close to you," she said slowly, "stood to gain if you were incapacitated. Or dead," Jonathan finished. The room felt smaller suddenly. The steady beeping of machines sounded louder, almost intrusive. Emily closed the folder carefully. "Does anyone else know?" "My legal counsel. My head of security. And now you." Emily blinked. "Why tell me?" Jonathan studied her, his gaze unreadable. "Because you noticed what trained professionals missed." "I wasn't thinking about money or power," Emily said. "I was thinking about a man about to fall." "That," Jonathan said quietly, "is exactly why I trust you." The door opened softly, and Robert Hale stepped inside. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, "we've confirmed something you should see." He handed Jonathan a tablet. Jonathan scrolled, his expression hardening. "What is it?" Emily asked. "Footage," Robert said. "From earlier today. Security cameras near the stage. Audio included." Jonathan tapped the screen and set it on the table between them. The video played. It showed the stage from a side angle. Jonathan stepping up. The crowd roaring. And then, 2 men standing near the edge of the restricted area, partially obscured by equipment. Their voices came through faintly but clearly enough. "Doesn't look good," one man said. "Relax," the other replied. "If it happens here, it happens fast. No one questions nature." Emily's blood ran cold. Jonathan paused the video. "I don't recognize their faces," Emily said. "No," Jonathan agreed. "But I recognize the tone." He handed the tablet back to Robert. "Find them." Robert nodded. "Already in progress." Jonathan leaned back, exhaustion finally catching up to him. For the first time since Emily had met him, he looked vulnerable, not weak, but human. "You didn't just save my life today," Jonathan said softly. "You disrupted a plan." Emily swallowed. "I didn't mean to." "I know," he said. "That's what makes it dangerous." She hesitated. "Why not go public? Expose everything?" Jonathan gave a faint smile, devoid of humor. "Because the truth doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it paints a target on your back." Emily hugged her arms tighter. "So what happens now?" Jonathan looked at her, really looked at her. "You disappear," he said. Her head snapped up. "What?" "Officially," he clarified. "The story will be that you were dismissed. Unreachable. Gone back to a quiet life. And unofficially—" Jonathan's eyes held hers steadily. "Unofficially, you stay close. Under my protection." Emily shook her head. "I'm just a maid." Jonathan smiled faintly. "Not anymore." The door opened again, this time revealing a nurse who reminded Jonathan it was time to rest. As Emily turned to leave, Jonathan spoke once more. "Emily." She paused. "You were willing to be hated to do the right thing," he said. "That's rare." Emily met his gaze. "So is a billionaire who listens." She stepped out into the hallway, her mind racing. She had walked into that plaza as invisible staff. She walked out of the hospital as something else entirely. And somewhere deep in Manhattan's shadows, people were already realizing their plan had failed. Which meant the real danger was only just beginning. Emily Carter officially stopped existing on a Wednesday morning. That was how Jonathan Whitmore phrased it. Her supervisor received a carefully worded email from Whitmore Global Holdings citing internal restructuring and event protocol violations. Her access badge was deactivated. Her name vanished from staff rosters. No termination meeting. No explanation. Just silence. By noon, the internet had already decided her fate. Some called her a hero. Others called her an ungrateful servant who attacked her employer. A few labeled her worse. Emily sat in the back seat of a black SUV as Manhattan blurred past the tinted windows. She watched her city, the only home she had ever really known, slide by like a movie she was no longer part of. "You'll be safe where you're going," Robert Hale said from the front seat. Emily clasped her hands together. "You keep saying that." Robert met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Because it's true." The vehicle turned onto a private road north of the city, climbing toward a wooded estate hidden behind iron gates. Cameras tracked their approach. The gates opened without pause. Emily exhaled slowly. She had cleaned mansions before. She had polished marble floors she would never own. But this place, this was different. It wasn't flashy. It was quiet. Powerful in a way that didn't need to show off. "This is one of Mr. Whitmore's private residences," Robert said. "Very few people know it exists." Emily swallowed. "Why bring me here?" Robert's voice hardened. "Because people are already asking questions about you." Inside the house, the air smelled of cedar and stone. Security was subtle but everywhere. Hidden cameras, quiet footsteps, eyes watching from corners that looked empty. Emily was shown to a guest room larger than her entire apartment had been. A clean bed. Fresh clothes folded neatly. A phone with no number attached. "Someone will come get you when Mr. Whitmore is ready," Robert said. "Until then, don't answer any calls. Don't go outside alone." Emily frowned. "You're treating me like a witness." Robert paused. "That's because you are." Hours later, Jonathan Whitmore watched a different kind of screen. He sat in a secure conference room at the estate, a thin blanket over his legs, his posture still strong despite the foreline in his arm. Around the table sat the people who ran his empire, men and women in immaculate suits, faces carefully neutral. His board. "Jonathan," said Mark Ellison, the vice chairman, voice smooth as glass, "we're glad you're recovering." Jonathan nodded once. I'm glad to be alive." A few polite smiles appeared. "We all saw the footage," another board member said. "The incident was unfortunate." Jonathan's eyes sharpened. "Which incident?" "The assault," Mark said calmly. "By the staff member." Jonathan leaned forward slowly. "You mean the woman who recognized I was having a stroke and saved my life?" The room went quiet. Mark cleared his throat. "That's one interpretation." Jonathan smiled faintly. "It's the medical one." A woman across the table spoke up. "Jonathan, perception matters. Investors are nervous. The narrative is unstable." Jonathan tapped a folder on the table. "Then let's talk about instability," he said. He opened the folder and slid copies of documents across the table. Medical records, transaction logs, shell company ownership charts. Faces changed. "Dr. Leonard Crane," Jonathan continued, "adjusted my medication to a dosage that significantly increased my stroke risk." Mark stiffened. "That's speculation." Jonathan looked directly at him. "Dr. Crane purchased shares in Whitmore Global through a proxy company 2 weeks before my collapse." A murmur rippled through the room. "That doesn't prove intent," Mark said carefully. "No," Jonathan agreed. "But this does." He nodded to the screen behind him. Audio played. "If it happens here, it happens fast. No one questions nature." Silence slammed into the room. Jonathan let it sit there, thick and suffocating. "Someone on this board," he said calmly, "believed I wouldn't leave that stage alive." Eyes shifted. Throats tightened. "You're accusing us?" one man snapped. Jonathan shook his head. "I'm informing you." He leaned back, voice colder now. "The woman you wanted arrested disrupted that plan. Which makes her inconvenient. Which makes her a liability." Mark exhaled sharply. "Jonathan, this is paranoia." Jonathan's gaze locked onto him. "Is it?" Mark's jaw tightened. Jonathan continued, "Effective immediately, Dr. Leonard Crane is suspended pending investigation. All recent board-level stock acquisitions will be audited, and anyone found attempting to profit from my incapacitation will face criminal charges." The room erupted. "You can't. This will tank confidence." "You're overreacting." Jonathan raised a hand. The room fell silent. "I built this company from nothing," he said quietly. "I know exactly what betrayal looks like." He stood slowly, steady despite the weakness in his body. "And let me be very clear," he added. "The woman who saved my life is under my personal protection. Any attempt to harm her, directly or indirectly, will be treated as an attack on me." Across the table, Mark Ellison's expression didn't change, but his eyes did. Back at the estate, Emily sat alone on the edge of the bed, staring at the quiet phone beside her. She felt it now, the shift, the invisible line she had crossed. She had stepped between power and its plans. And power did not forgive easily. A soft knock sounded at her door. Robert stepped in. "Mr. Whitmore wants to see you." Emily stood, her heart pounding. She didn't know it yet, but enemies in tailored suits were already deciding what to do about the maid who refused to stay invisible. And some of them were very, very angry. The first headline appeared before sunrise. Emily Carter woke to the sound of the secure phone vibrating on the nightstand. The screen glowed with a single alert forwarded by Robert Hale. "Maid linked to Whitmore collapse. Investigation underway." Her chest tightened. She sat up slowly, the quiet of the estate pressing in around her. Outside, mist clung to the trees, turning the world into a blurred watercolor. It looked peaceful. It wasn't. By the time Emily dressed, 3 more alerts had arrived. Sources question motives of woman who struck billionaire insiders suggest staged incident. Did Emily Carter profit from chaos? She stared at the words until they stopped looking real. A knock came at the door. Robert entered, his face set in that controlled, unreadable way Emily was learning meant trouble. "They're moving faster than expected," he said. Emily's voice felt small. "Who is they?" "The people who don't like losing," Robert replied, "and who are very good at changing stories." They walked briskly through the estate's corridors to a smaller conference room. Jonathan Whitmore sat at the table, dressed now in a soft gray sweater instead of a suit. He looked stronger than he had yesterday, but angrier, too. "They're turning you into the villain," Jonathan said without preamble. Emily forced herself to meet his eyes. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I know," Jonathan said. "That's not the point." He slid a tablet across the table. Emily scrolled. An anonymous source claimed she had lunged at Mr. Whitmore in a fit of rage. Another implied she had been coached or paid. One article hinted at a personal relationship between them. Emily's stomach churned. "This is insane." Jonathan nodded. "And effective." Robert leaned against the wall. "We traced the first leak to a PR firm used by one of the board members." Emily looked up sharply. "Mark Ellison." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Mark Ellison." The room fell silent. "They can't prove anything," Emily said, though doubt crept into her voice. "The doctors confirmed the stroke." Jonathan folded his hands. "Facts don't matter as much as repetition. If they say it often enough, loudly enough, people start to doubt." A sharp knock interrupted them. A younger security officer stepped in, tense. "Sir, NYC police are here." Emily's breath caught. Jonathan stood. "On whose authority?" "They say it's a formal inquiry," the officer replied. "They want to speak with Miss Carter." Robert swore under his breath. Emily felt the floor tilt. "Am I being arrested?" Jonathan shook his head. "Not yet." "Yet," Robert echoed grimly. Two detectives waited in the front sitting room, badges visible, posture polite but firm. Emily noticed immediately how their eyes lingered on her, measuring, weighing. "Miss Carter," one said, "we just have a few questions." They asked about her background, her work history, her relationship, if any, with Jonathan Whitmore. "No," Emily said calmly. "I had never met him before that day." They asked about the slap. "I acted because I believed Mr. Whitmore was having a medical emergency," Emily replied. "Which was later confirmed." One detective nodded, scribbling notes. The other watched her carefully. "Did anyone instruct you to do that?" he asked. "No." "Did anyone promise you compensation?" "No." "Are you aware that some believe your actions were staged?" Emily felt heat rise in her chest. "Some people believe the earth is flat." The detective's pen paused. Jonathan stepped forward slightly. "If you have a charge, bring it," he said coolly. "If not, you're harassing a witness." The detectives exchanged a glance. "We're not done," the first said. "Miss Carter may be contacted again." They left without another word. The door closed. Emily's knees finally gave out, and she sank into a chair. "They're going to keep coming," she whispered. Jonathan nodded. "Yes." She looked at him, fear breaking through her composure for the first time. "I didn't sign up for this." Jonathan's expression softened. "I know." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Robert cleared his throat. "There's more." He turned on the screen mounted on the wall. Security footage appeared, grainy, but clear enough. It showed Emily in the service corridor the morning of the event. A man approached her. He wore a catering jacket, his face partially obscured. Emily leaned forward. "I've never seen him before." The footage played with audio. "Just doing your job," the man said casually. "Stage fright happens to everyone." Emily frowned. "I don't remember this." Robert nodded. "Because it didn't register at the time. But the implication is dangerous." Jonathan's voice was low. "They're suggesting contact. That you were primed." Emily's hands curled into fists. "That's a lie." "Yes," Jonathan said. "But it's a convincing one, if we don't control the narrative." Emily stood abruptly. "I won't hide." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "What?" "I won't disappear while they destroy my name," she said. Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned with resolve. "If they want a story, I'll give them the truth." Robert shook his head. "Going public without protection is suicide." Jonathan considered her for a long moment. "You're right about one thing," he said finally. Running makes you look guilty. Emily met his gaze. Then stand with me. Jonathan smiled faintly. I already am. He turned to Robert. Set it up. Robert hesitated. Sir. A controlled press conference, Jonathan said firmly. Medical experts. Timeline. Evidence. Emily's heart raced. You'll do that for me? Jonathan's eyes hardened. I'll do it for the truth. Robert nodded slowly. Then we move fast. As plans formed around her, Emily felt something unexpected settle into her chest. Not confidence, exactly, but clarity. They had tried to make her a villain. They had underestimated one thing. She was done being invisible. And when the lights turned on, not everyone in tailored suits would like what they revealed. The press conference was scheduled for noon. By 8 in the morning, every major network had already set up outside Whitmore Global's headquarters. Satellite vans crowded the streets. Camera operators argued over angles. Producers barked orders into headsets, sensing blood in the water. Inside the building, the atmosphere was razor-sharp. Emily Carter stood in a quiet prep room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back at her. Her hair was neatly styled. She wore a simple cream blouse and dark slacks, nothing expensive, nothing flashy. Jonathan's team had been careful about that. Relatable, the stylist had said. Grounded. Real. Emily swallowed. I'm still just me. That's exactly the point, Robert Hale replied from the doorway. He stepped inside, holding a tablet. Once you walk out there, he said, there's no rewinding. Every word will be dissected. Emily nodded. I know. Robert studied her for a moment. You're handling this better than most people twice your age. Emily gave a faint smile. I've been underestimated my whole life. Down the hall, Jonathan Whitmore was preparing in his own way. A doctor checked his vitals one last time. A communications advisor hovered anxiously. But Jonathan ignored them all, standing alone for a moment by the window, watching the crowd below. Sir, the advisor said, if you're not ready. I'm ready, Jonathan replied calmly. He turned, his expression composed but firm. There was no sign of weakness in him now. If anything, surviving had sharpened him. Bring Emily, he said. The doors opened. The roar of the press hit them like a wall. Flashes exploded. Microphones surged forward. Voices overlapped in a frantic chorus. Mr. Whitmore, is this a cover-up? Emily Carter, were you paid? Who ordered the medication change? Jonathan walked to the podium without breaking stride. Emily followed a step behind, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might shake the floor. Jonathan raised a hand. Silence spread reluctantly through the room. I won't take long, he began. His voice carried easily, controlled and clear. I'm here because lies travel fast. And today, we stop them. He gestured slightly toward Emily. This woman, he continued, is the reason I'm standing here instead of lying in a hospital bed unable to speak, or worse. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jonathan went on the morning of my collapse, I suffered an acute ischemic stroke. Multiple independent physicians have confirmed this. Screens behind him lit up with medical charts and timelines. Miss Carter recognized the signs before my own security team or medical staff did, Jonathan said. Her actions accelerated my treatment and prevented severe brain damage. A reporter shouted, Did she assault you? Jonathan's eyes hardened. She saved my life, he said flatly. Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. Jonathan turned to her. Emily! Her breath caught. Tell them, he said quietly. She stepped forward, hands trembling slightly as she gripped the podium. I didn't plan anything, she said. I didn't know who Jonathan Whitmore was beyond what everyone knows. I acted because I saw a man about to collapse, and because I've seen what happens when no one acts. Her voice steadied as she spoke about her father. About loss. About learning the signs no one had taught her before. I didn't think about cameras, Emily finished. I thought about time. The room was silent. Then Jonathan spoke again. There are claims that this incident was staged, he said. Those claims are false. There are also claims that Miss Carter benefited financially." He paused. "She has not received, and will not be receiving, any payment for what she did." Emily blinked in surprise. Jonathan continued, "Because doing the right thing shouldn't require a contract." A reporter raised a hand. "What about the allegations of internal wrongdoing?" Jonathan's gaze sharpened. "Those allegations are under active investigation. I will say this, I am alive because someone chose courage over comfort. Anyone who finds that inconvenient should ask themselves why." The room buzzed. Questions flew. "Who changed your medication? Is your board involved? Will there be arrests?" Jonathan lifted his hand again. "The truth will come out. And when it does, it will not be quiet." He stepped back from the podium. As they exited the room, the noise surged again, but this time it sounded different. Less accusatory. More uncertain. Back in the corridor, Emily's legs finally felt weak. "You did well," Jonathan said softly. She looked at him, eyes shining. "You didn't have to stand with me like that." Jonathan smiled faintly. "Yes, I did." They paused at the end of the hall. Outside, headlines were already changing. Billionaire defends Maid who saved his life. Medical reports confirm heroic intervention. Questions mount over Whitmore medication. Emily exhaled slowly. But Jonathan didn't relax. "They won't stop," he said quietly. "Now they'll just change tactics." Emily met his gaze. "So will we." Jonathan nodded. Because when a billionaire finally spoke the truth aloud, some powerful people realized too late that the narrative had slipped out of their control. And the consequences were about to become very personal. The first arrest didn't make the evening news. That was how Emily knew it mattered. She was sitting in the estate's quiet library when Robert Hale walked in without knocking, his expression sharper than she'd ever seen it. The television behind him showed rolling coverage of Jonathan's press conference, analysts arguing over body language and motives, but Robert ignored it. "We found them," he said. Emily straightened. "Who?" "The men near the stage," Robert replied. "Not names yet, but we know where they came from." Jonathan Whitmore entered a moment later, moving carefully but with purpose. He looked tired in a way cameras would never capture, the kind of exhaustion that lived behind the eyes. "Close the door," Jonathan said. Robert did. Jonathan turned to Emily. "Do you remember when I told you that someone didn't want me standing on that stage?" Emily nodded. "We now know how far they were willing to go." Robert set a small black device on the table between them. Emily frowned. "What is that?" "A voice recorder," Robert said. "Recovered from one of the men near the stage." Jonathan leaned forward. He tried to destroy it when security grabbed him. Didn't succeed. Emily's pulse quickened. "What's on it?" Jonathan didn't answer. He pressed a button. Static filled the room at first. Then voices, clearer than Emily expected. "Keep your distance," a man said. "Relax," another replied. "Once he goes down, no one's going to look at us." Emily felt her skin prickle. The recording continued. "The medication should do the rest. If the pressure spikes, the clot finishes the job. And if it doesn't, then the crowd does. Panic buys time." Emily's breath caught. Jonathan's jaw tightened so hard she thought it might crack. Then came the final voice, calm, controlled, unmistakably familiar. "Just make sure it happens before the markets close." Silence followed. Emily looked up slowly. "That voice." Jonathan nodded once. "Mark Ellison." The name landed like a gunshot. Robert exhaled sharply. Audio analysts confirmed it. 98% match. Emily felt sick. "He wasn't just waiting for you to fall." "No," Jonathan said quietly. "He was timing my death." Jonathan stood, pacing slowly despite Robert's look of concern. "Ellison knew my health was compromised," Jonathan continued. "He knew about the medication change. He knew the market reaction would be immediate." Emily hugged her arms around herself. "That's murder." Jonathan stopped pacing. "Yes," he said. "It is." Robert straightened. We've already turned a copy over to federal investigators. Quietly. Emily looked between them. What happens now? Jonathan met her eyes. Now we decide how much sunlight to use. She frowned. Sunlight. Expose everything at once, Jonathan said, and they scatter. But they also get desperate. Robert added, or we release it strategically, force mistakes. Emily thought of the headlines. The lies. The way they'd tried to turn her into a criminal. They tried to bury the truth, she said. Why protect them? Jonathan studied her for a long moment. Because power doesn't fall quietly, he said. It lashes out first. Robert's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stiffened. They know, he said. Jonathan didn't ask how. Ellison resigned from the board 15 minutes ago, Robert continued. Public statement cites health concerns. He's moving assets. Quickly. Emily's stomach dropped. He's running. Yes, Jonathan said. And he's not running alone. The room fell silent. Emily broke it. Then don't let him control the timing. Jonathan's gaze snapped to her. Release the recording, she said. Not all of it. Just enough. Robert hesitated. That could escalate. That's the point, Emily said firmly. You said panic buys time. Take that time back. Jonathan looked at her, really looked at her, and then smiled, slow and dangerous. You're learning, he said. He turned to Robert. Leak the first 30 seconds. Anonymous source. Tonight. Robert nodded. I'll handle it. Emily's phone buzzed. A news alert lit the screen. Whitmore investigation deepens. Source claims audio evidence exists. Emily's breath caught. Jonathan watched the alert appear on her screen. They thought you were a weakness, he said quietly. Something easy to break. Emily met his gaze. They were wrong. Jonathan nodded. Yes, they were. Outside, Manhattan lit up as night fell, screens glowing, stories spreading, whispers turning into fear. Somewhere in the city, Mark Ellison was listening to the same news, realizing the ground beneath him was cracking. And for the first time since the slap that shocked Manhattan, the people who had planned everything so carefully understood one terrifying truth. The Maid they tried to erase had become the reason their secrets would finally be heard. The leak detonated at 9:17 p.m. By 9:18, it was everywhere. Emily watched the footage play on 3 different screens in the estate's media room, each one tuned to a different network, each one replaying the same 30 seconds of audio on a loop. Analysts leaned forward. Anchors struggled to keep their voices steady. Legal experts spoke in hushed, urgent tones. Once he goes down, no one's going to look at us. The medication should do the rest. Make sure it happens before the markets close. The final line hit hardest every time. Jonathan Whitmore sat back in his chair, hands steepled, eyes fixed on the screens. He didn't look triumphant. He looked resolved. They're calling it attempted corporate assassination, Robert Hale said quietly. Federal investigators just confirmed Ellison is a person of interest. Emily felt a strange mix of relief and dread. So it's over. Jonathan shook his head. No. Now it's visible. Outside the estate, security tightened. Inside the city, panic spread through boardrooms and trading floors. Stock prices dipped, then stabilized, then dipped again as uncertainty rippled outward. Every executive who had once stood confidently beside Mark Ellison suddenly found themselves issuing carefully worded statements. Distance became survival. By morning, Ellison's name dominated headlines. Former vice chairman linked to audio plot federal warrant issued for Mark Ellison. Whitmore Global cooperates with investigation. Emily barely slept. When dawn broke, her phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't recognize. Unknown. They're finally listening. Thank you. She stared at the screen, unsure who it was from, or how they had her number. Robert took the phone gently from her hand. We'll change that, he said. The day moved fast. Federal agents arrived at Whitmore Global headquarters before noon. Boxes were carried out. Hard drives were sealed. Names that had once inspired confidence were suddenly spoken with caution. Jonathan gave a second statement, short, firm, and devastatingly clear. "I built this company on trust," he said. "Anyone who betrayed that trust will face the consequences." No smiles. No slogans. Just truth. By mid-afternoon, the final piece fell into place. Mark Ellison was found. He hadn't made it out of the country. Agents intercepted him at a private airstrip in New Jersey, minutes from departure. Cameras caught him being escorted toward an unmarked vehicle, his tailored suit rumpled, his face pale with fury and disbelief. Emily watched the footage in silence. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the man whose voice." Jonathan nodded. "Yes." For the first time since all of this began, Emily felt the tension in her chest loosen. Not disappear, but ease. Justice, it turned out, didn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it arrived quietly, in handcuffs. That evening, Jonathan asked Emily to walk with him through the estate gardens. The air was cool, the path lit by low lamps that cast soft pools of light on stone. "You didn't have to stay," Jonathan said as they walked. "Most people would have run." Emily considered that. "I thought about it. And I was tired of being afraid," she said. "And tired of watching powerful people decide the truth didn't matter." Jonathan smiled faintly. "You disrupted an entire ecosystem." She laughed softly. "I slapped a man." "You reminded the world that actions have consequences," Jonathan corrected. They stopped near the edge of the garden, where the trees opened up to a view of the city glowing in the distance. "The investigation will take time," Jonathan said. "Trials. Testimony. More headlines." Emily nodded. "I can handle headlines." Jonathan turned to her. "What about afterward?" She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "When this ends," he said, "you won't be able to go back to being invisible. People will know your name." Emily looked down at her hands. "I never asked for that." "I know," Jonathan said. "But you deserve to choose what comes next." He paused, then added, "I'd like you to stay. Not as staff. As part of my risk advisory team." Emily looked up sharply. "You're what?" "You see what others miss," Jonathan said simply. "And you act." She searched his face, making sure this wasn't pity or gratitude disguised as opportunity. "Think about it," he added. "No pressure." Emily exhaled slowly. "I will." That night, the final headline broke. Federal charges filed. Audio confirmed authentic. Public opinion shifted decisively. The maid was no longer a suspect. She was a witness. A catalyst. A reminder. As Emily lay awake in her room, she thought about how quickly life could pivot, how one moment of courage could redraw everything. Somewhere in a holding cell, Mark Ellison was realizing that power didn't protect you forever. And somewhere deep inside herself, Emily realized something else. She hadn't just helped expose a crime. She had discovered her own voice. And she wasn't done using it yet. The trial took 6 months. 6 months of testimony, sealed documents, expert witnesses, and quiet revelations that reshaped more than one powerful career. Emily Carter followed it all from a distance, sometimes from the estate, sometimes from a small apartment Jonathan insisted she choose for herself in the city. She watched Mark Ellison's confidence erode piece by piece. The tailored suits were replaced by plain jackets. The calm voice from the recording fractured under cross-examination. And when the jury finally returned, their verdict was swift. Guilty. The courtroom didn't erupt. There was no dramatic gasp, no applause. Justice, Emily learned, often arrived without theater. Jonathan Whitmore attended the sentencing alone. Emily didn't ask him why. She already knew. Some battles had to be witnessed privately. On a quiet afternoon a week later, Jonathan invited Emily to the top floor of Whitmore Tower, the very building where everything had begun. The ribbon-cutting stage was gone. The plaza below looked ordinary now, stripped of spectacle. People passed through without realizing how close history had brushed that space. Jonathan stood by the window, hands in his pockets. "Do you remember what you were thinking right before you slapped me?" he asked. Emily smiled faintly. "I was thinking that if I hesitated, I'd regret it forever." Jonathan nodded. "That moment cost you your anonymity." "Yes," Emily said. and gave me something else. Your voice, Jonathan replied. She turned to him. You said there would be a choice. There still is. Jonathan gestured toward the conference table. A folder sat there, thin, unassuming. Emily approached it cautiously. This looks like paperwork. Jonathan smiled. It is. She opened the folder. Inside was not a contract for a job. It was a charter. The Carter Foundation for Medical Awareness and Early Intervention. Emily's breath caught. Jonathan spoke quietly. You taught the world something that day. That awareness saves lives. I want to make that lesson permanent. She flipped through the pages, hands trembling. Funding. Nationwide training programs. Free public workshops. Emergency response education for underserved communities. Her name, hers, on every page. This isn't a reward, Emily whispered. This is a responsibility, Jonathan finished. If you want it. Tears blurred the words. I don't know how to run a foundation, she said. Jonathan smiled. You didn't know how to stop a stroke either. You learned. Emily laughed through tears. You're very persuasive for a man who got slapped by a maid. Jonathan chuckled. I've been through worse. They stood there in silence, the city stretching endlessly beneath them. You know, Jonathan said, people still ask me what it felt like. Emily raised an eyebrow. To almost die. To be slapped, he corrected. And, she asked. Jonathan turned to face her fully. It felt like someone refused to let me disappear. Emily swallowed hard. That evening, the announcement went public. Not about money. Not about titles. About training. Headlines followed, quieter this time, steadier. Foundation launched to teach life-saving medical science woman who saved billionaire turns moment into mission. Emily visited Philadelphia the next month. She stood in a modest community center, watching a group of parents learn how to recognize stroke symptoms. When a woman raised her hand and asked, "What if we're wrong?" Emily answered without hesitation. "Then you acted," she said. "And acting is never wrong." After the session, a young man approached her, eyes shining. "My mom had a stroke last year," he said. "We caught it early because someone taught us the signs." Emily nodded, emotion tightening her throat. "That's why we're here," she replied. Months later, Jonathan watched from the audience as Emily delivered a keynote at a national health conference. She spoke without notes, calm, clear, unafraid. She no longer tried to stay small. Afterward, Jonathan joined her backstage. "You look comfortable up there," he said. Emily smiled. Turns out invisibility was a habit, not a destiny. Jonathan nodded. "I'm glad you broke it." They walked out together into the evening, no cameras waiting, no chaos trailing behind them. Just two people whose lives had collided in a moment neither could forget. "Do you ever wish that day hadn't happened?" Emily asked quietly. Jonathan considered the question. "No," he said. "It showed me who to trust." Emily looked at the city lights. "And it showed me who I could be," she replied. Somewhere, a siren wailed and then faded. Somewhere else, someone noticed a symptom in time. And the slap that once shocked Manhattan had become something else entirely. Not a scandal. Not a headline. But the beginning of a legacy neither of them had expected, and one the world would quietly benefit from for years to come. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you believe that one brave decision can change everything, don't forget to subscribe. We share powerful, emotional stories that remind us why courage, truth, and humanity still matter in this world. New life-changing stories are uploaded regularly, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Subscribe now, turn on the notification bell, and join a community that believes every voice counts, no matter how small it starts. Your support helps keep these stories alive.